The first time the Warlord King saw Ilaria Vale, she was barefoot in the snow, kneeling beside his bleeding body, with both hands pressed against the wound in his chest, while assassins closed around them through the pines. Her dress was torn, her lips were blue from the cold, and the blood running down her wrists should have been red. Yet beneath the moon it glowed like liquid starlight. Cale Dravener, the feared Warlord King of the Northern Wolf Kingdoms, had survived poison, steel, betrayal, and war. But he had never seen a woman thrown away by one alpha command, the dying heart of a cursed king to beat again. He should have ordered his guards to seize her. He should have feared her. Instead, as the snow around them began to melt in a perfect silver circle, and every wolf in the forest lowered its head, he looked at the rejected Luna, who had just saved his life, and whispered, "Who cast you out?" Ilaria did not answer, because behind them, through the storm, the wolves of her former pack were already hunting her, and by dawn the entire kingdom would know the truth Ronan Blackthornne's court had tried to bury. The woman they had humiliated was not weak, not barren, not cursed, and not theirs to discard. She was the last blood of the moon healers, and the ancient prophecy had awakened the moment her knees touched the snow. Before the storm, before the blood, before the Warlord King placed his black cloak around her shoulders and called her queen before 100 armored wolves, Ilaria Vale stood in the great hall of Blackthornne Keep, with a silver Luna crown trembling in her hands, while every noble in the pack watched her fall from grace. The hall had been dressed for celebration, though not for her. Crimson banners hung from the rafters, roasted venison smoked upon long tables, and the stone floor had been covered in winter roses, imported from the southern valleys, their pale petals crushed beneath the boots of warriors who had once bowed to her. Ilaria had worn the midnight blue gown given to her on the day she became Luna, the same gown Ronan Blackthornne had once set, but now he could not even meet her eyes. He stood at the foot of the alpha dais in ceremonial black armor, broad-shouldered, golden-haired, beloved by the council, with his hand resting at the waist of Selene Marrow, the younger noblewoman whose beauty had become the court's favorite weapon. Selene's smile was soft enough to seem innocent from a distance, but Ilaria had seen that smile in corridors, at council tables, in the quiet moments when servants lowered their heads and pretended not to hear poison being poured into the alpha's ear. For 3 years, Ilaria had served as Luna of Blackthornne, not with sharp words or displays of power, but with patience, mercy, and the kind of quiet strength no one praises until it is gone. She had tended the sick children of the lower dens, negotiated grain for the mountain villages, stood at Ronan's side through 2 border wars, and held the pack together when fever swept through the east wing. Yet she had never shifted before the court, never birthed an heir, never howled loudly enough to satisfy the old wolves who believed a Luna should be both fertile and fierce. They called her moon-pale, bloodless, soft-handed, a healer without magic, a Luna whose wolf slept too deeply to matter. Ronan had once defended her. That was the part that wounded most deeply. He had once taken her hand beneath the same silver chandeliers and sworn before the moon goddess that no council, no rival, no hunger for power would make him regret choosing her. But vows, Ilaria learned, could rot inside a man long before they left his mouth. The council elder raised his staff and demanded silence, though the hall was already waiting with cruel eagerness, and Ronan stepped forward with the coldness of a stranger wearing the face of the man she had loved. "Ilaria Vale," he said, his voice carrying across the stone. "Before the blood of Blackthornne, before the council of wolves, and before the moon that witnesses all bonds, I release you from the place of Luna." A murmur passed through the hall, like wind across dead leaves. Ilaria did not move. Her fingers tightened around the crown until its delicate points cut into her palms. "Ronan," she whispered, but he did not soften. Selene lowered her eyes in false sorrow, though one hand had already risen to touch the place at her brow where the crown would soon rest. "You have given this pack no heir," Ronan continued, each word shaped carefully, as if rehearsed by others. "You have shown no strength before our enemies. Your wolf remains silent. The council has judged that Blackthornne requires a Luna of proven blood. He turned slightly, and Selene stepped forward, radiant in white fur and rubies, her dark hair braided with gold. The hall erupted in approval before the words were even finished. Ilaria heard laughter from the younger warriors, whispers from noble women who had once accepted her kindness, and somewhere near the back, a child beginning to cry before being hushed by his mother. It should have ended there, with dishonor sharp enough to kill without steel, but Selene had never wanted only the crown. She wanted Ilaria broken in a way no one could repair. "My alpha," Selene said sweetly, her voice clear as a bell. "If she is truly released, the mark must be cleansed. The pack should not carry confusion into a new reign." The hall quieted. Ilaria's heart stopped. Every wolf understood what such cleansing meant. A rejected Luna could be set aside, exiled, or hidden in a widow's tower. But to cleanse the mark in public was to tear away the last remnant of maid honor before the entire pack. It was humiliation disguised as tradition. Ronan hesitated for one breath, and in that breath, Ilaria saw him, the boy he had been, the man who had once kissed her knuckles after battle, the alpha who had wept when she sat beside him through his father's funeral. Then the council elder leaned near his ear. Selene's fingers tightened on his arm, and Ronan's face closed like a gate. He approached her. Ilaria wanted to step back, yet her pride held her still. He lifted his hand to the faded silver mark at the base of her throat, the mark that had never burned bright the way other mate marks did, and as his thumb pressed against it, pain split through her body, so violently her knees nearly failed. No one came to her. The bond tore like cloth under a blade. A gasp escaped her, and with it something strange happened. Every candle in the hall flickered blue. For one moment, only one, the winter roses at her feet lifted their crushed heads, as if drinking moonlight from the stone. Ilaria saw it. Selene saw it too. So did the elder, whose face went white with a terror too old to be ordinary. But Ronan, blinded by pride and the hunger of his court, saw only the woman he had chosen to discard. The crown slipped from Ilaria's bloody palms and rang upon the floor. Selene smiled. The court laughed, and when Ronan gave the final command, his voice was quieter than the storm gathering outside. "Take her beyond the gates. Let the snow decide whether she still belongs to the living." They did not give her a cloak. That was the first cruelty Ilaria noticed, because grief had made the greater cruelties too large to understand. 2 guards seized her by the arms and dragged her through the outer corridors while the feast resumed behind her, music rising to cover the sound of her bare feet striking stone. The younger servants looked away as she passed, not because they hated her, but because pity was dangerous in a keep where Selene's smile could ruin a family by dawn. The older ones wept silently. One kitchen boy, barely 12, tried to step forward with a folded shawl, but a guard struck him hard enough to send him against the wall. Ilaria turned at the sound, and for the first time that night, something hot moved beneath her sorrow. Not anger yet, something older, something buried. The candles along the corridor bent toward her, as if caught in an unseen wind, their flames changing from gold to pale blue before snapping back again. The guards cursed and hurried faster. Outside, Blackthornne Keep rose above the northern valley like a beast crouched against the mountains, its towers black against a sky swollen with snow. The storm had arrived in full fury. Wind tore at Ilaria's unbound hair. Ice cut across her cheeks, and beyond the gatehouse the forest waited, dark and endless. She looked back once, not for Ronan, but for the life she had built with hands that never seemed strong enough in the eyes of wolves who worshipped violence. She remembered the nursery she had prepared and never used, the council chamber where her words were ignored until a man repeated them, the eastern infirmary, where dying wolves had clutched her fingers and begged her not to leave. She had loved Blackthornne. That was the shame of it. She had loved a pack that had let her be thrown into the snow. At the outer gate, Selene appeared above the battlements beneath a hood of white fur, Ronan beside her like a statue carved from regret. For a moment Ilaria thought he might stop them. His hand twitched at his side. His wolf, she knew, would be pacing inside him, restless and confused. Mate bonds did not vanish simply because pride demanded it. But the elder stood behind him, lips moving in counsel, and Celine rested her head against his shoulder. The gate opened. The guards shoved Ilaria through. She fell hard onto the frozen road, palms splitting against stone and ice, and the gate groaned shut behind her with the finality of a tomb. For several breaths she remained where she had fallen, snow gathering in her hair, her body trembling so violently she could not tell whether it was cold or pain. Then the wolf howls began behind the walls, not mourning, not anger, but ceremony. Celine was being crowned. Ilaria pushed herself upright. She would not die listening to another woman receive her name. She walked. The road disappeared quickly beneath the storm, forcing her into the trees where the wind was somewhat broken by pine and black birch. Every step was agony. Her gown clung wet against her legs, her feet bled across the snow, and the torn mark at her throat pulsed with a hollow ache that made the world blur. Once, she thought she heard Ronan calling her name, but when she turned, there was only wind between the trees. Twice, she nearly sank down and closed her eyes. The cold spoke gently after a while, promising stillness, promising relief, promising that if she slept, she would not have to feel the shape of rejection in her chest. But Ilaria had spent years teaching frightened children to breathe through fever, wounded warriors to grip life through pain, grieving mothers to survive another dawn. She had no right to abandon herself after saving so many others, so she kept walking. Then, deep in the forest, the storm changed. The snow stopped falling around her, though it continued beyond the circle of trees. Flakes hung motionless in the air, suspended like tiny stars. Ilaria froze. Before her, in a hollow between ancient roots, a white wolf lay dying, its fur streaked with black veins that pulsed beneath the skin like living shadows. She had heard stories of the northern curse, the wasting darkness that took Dravener wolves after battle, turning their strength inward until their hearts burst. No healer could touch it. No priest could name its origin. Yet this wolf was not alone. A man in black armor leaned against a tree nearby, one hand pressed to his side, his face half shadowed by the hood of a torn war cloak. 3 dead assassins lay in the snow around him, their throats opened, their blades blackened with poison. More moved between the trees. Ilaria should have fled. She was barefoot, unarmed, rejected, half-frozen, and the man before her wore the iron wolf sigil of the northern war host, enemy to Blackthornne, since before her birth. Then the dying white wolf lifted its head and looked at her with eyes as old as winter. "Please," something inside her heard, though no mouth spoke. Ilaria stumbled forward. The wounded man saw her and raised a dagger, but his hand shook. "Run," he rasped. "They will kill anything that breathes." She knelt beside the wolf instead. "Then breathe," she whispered, though she did not know why, and when she placed her bleeding palm against the animal's chest, blue light spilled between her fingers. The wolf stopped convulsing. The snow beneath them melted outward. The assassins halted. The wounded man stared, as if the moon itself had bent down in human form. And in the distance, from the direction of Blackthornne Keep, hunting horns began to sound. The man Ilaria had found beneath the pines was not merely a soldier, though she did not know it at first, because kings are not supposed to bleed alone in the snow. He was Chael Dravener, Warlord King of the Iron Crescent, ruler of the northern strongholds, breaker of the Thorn Rebellion, the man-mothers in Blackthornne used as a warning when their children strayed too near the border. They said his wolf was black as a starless night and twice as merciless, that he had conquered 6 packs without smiling, that he wore no crown, because crowns were for men who needed gold to remind others of their power. Yet when Ilaria pressed her palm to the cursed white wolf and light rose from her blood, Chael looked less like a monster from border songs, and more like a man who had witnessed the impossible at the exact moment death had come to claim him. The assassins recovered first. 5 of them moved in a crescent, their cloaks marked not with Blackthornne colors, but with the silver knot of the royal council. A sigil few common wolves would dare carry. Ilaria saw it, and felt the cold in her bones deepen. These were not bandits. Someone powerful had wanted Kale dead, and the ambush had been prepared with poison meant for cursed wolves. The white wolf under her hand was still breathing, but Kale's wound bled dark through his armor. He tried to stand, and failed. Ilaria rose unsteadily between him and the blades. One assassin laughed. "The discarded Luna," he said, recognizing the torn gown, the bleeding throat, the crownless brow. How fitting. The North's butcher saved by Blackthornne's unwanted wife. The words should have crushed her. Instead, they struck the buried place inside her that had begun to glow. "Leave," Ilaria said, and her voice sounded unfamiliar even to herself. The assassin lifted his blade. "Move aside, little ghost." He lunged. Kale roared a warning, but Ilaria acted without thought. She raised her hand, not to strike, but to shield herself, and the blood on her palm flashed blue. The attacker flew backward as if seized by a giant invisible hand and slammed into a tree hard enough to crack the bark. Silence fell. Even the wind seemed to draw back. Ilaria stared at her own hand, horrified. The remaining assassins hesitated only a heartbeat before rushing together. Kale moved then, wounded or not, with a speed that made the night blur. His dagger found one throat, then another. The white wolf, newly strengthened, rose with a snarl and dragged a third into the snow. Ilaria reached for the wounded king as he staggered, and when her fingers closed around his wrist, a violent shock passed between them. It was not pain. It was recognition, not the soft warmth of the bond she had known with Ronan, which had always felt like a candle struggling in a draught, but something vast and terrible, like a door opening beneath a mountain. Kyle felt it too. His eyes, gray as storm iron, locked on hers. For one breath there was no forest, no blood, no storm, only the impossible pull between them. Then an arrow struck him high in the shoulder. Ilaria cried out. Kyle dropped to one knee. The last assassin drew a second arrow and aimed for Ilaria's heart. Before he could release it, a black wolf larger than any creature she had ever seen burst from the trees and tore him from the earth. More wolves followed, armored riders behind them bearing the Iron Crescent banner. The forest filled with growls, steel, and shouted commands. A tall woman with braided silver hair dismounted first, her sword already drawn. "My king," she called, rushing toward Kale before stopping short at the sight of Ilaria's glowing hands. Dozens of northern warriors stared. Ilaria backed away, suddenly aware that she stood among enemies wearing the gown of Blackthornne's rejected Luna, and the blood of their king on her palms. She expected chains. She expected accusation. Instead, Kale forced himself upright, though the effort turned his face pale. "No one touches her," he said. His voice was low, but every wolf heard it. The silver-haired commander looked from him to Ilaria. "Sire, she bears Blackthornne colors. She saved my life. She may be bait. Then the gods have sent bait with kinder hands than any court healer I have known." Kyle swayed. Ilaria moved before thinking, catching his arm, and again that strange current passed between them. The warrior stiffened, but Kale did not pull away. He looked down at her bare feet, at the torn mark on her throat, at the bruises forming along her arms where Ronan's guards had dragged her out. A darkness entered his expression that made the assassins' corpses seem fortunate. "Who did this to you?" he asked. Ilaria's lips parted, but the answer was swallowed by another sound. Blackthornne horns, closer now, hunting through the woods. Kale turned toward the noise, and when he spoke again, his command carried the weight of winter itself. "Bring her with us. If Blackthornne cast her into my forest, then Blackthornne has lost the right to claim her." They rode north before dawn, not along the open roads but through hidden passes known only to Dravener scouts, while Blackthornne riders searched the lower woods for the woman they had thrown away and the king they had failed to kill. Ilaria sat before Kale on his warhorse because she could barely remain conscious, wrapped in his black cloak, her frozen feet bound in strips of linen by the silver-haired commander whose name was Marin. Kyle should not have been strong enough to ride after the poison in his blood, yet he remained upright behind her, one arm braced protectively around her waist whenever the horse climbed dangerous ground. He said little. Neither did she. But silence between them did not feel empty. It was filled with unsent questions, with the heat of his breath near her hair, with the steady pressure of a man who had every reason to mistrust her, and yet had placed her within the circle of his own guard. Several times Ilaria felt him tense when distant horns echoed behind them. Several times she felt something inside herself answer the pulse of his wound, as if her blood knew the rhythm of his pain. She told herself it was fear, exhaustion, the aftermath of rejection. She did not let herself name it. By mid-morning, the storm thinned, and the land rose into a harsher beauty than anything she had known in Blackthornne. Cliffs glazed with ice, black pine forests, frozen rivers, shining beneath pale sun, and above it all, Iron Spire Keep, the northern fortress of House Dravener, carved into the side of a mountain like a crown made of stone and teeth. No banners of silk decorated its walls. No roses softened its gates. It was a place built to survive sieges, winters, betrayals, and kings who could not afford gentleness. Yet when they entered, the lower courtyard was crowded not with cruel warriors but with wounded wolves, anxious families, and children wrapped in fur cloaks watching their king return. A murmur rose at the sight of Ilaria. Blackthornne, rejected Luna, witch, spy, savior. The words followed her like shadows. Kale dismounted first, then reached up for her. She hesitated. Pride urged her to climb down without help, but her legs betrayed her, and when she slipped, his hands caught her waist with startling care. The courtyard quieted. It was not proper for the Warlord King to touch a foreign Luna, rejected or not, before his people, especially not with such visible restraint, as if she were both fragile and dangerous. Ilaria felt the heat of every stare. Kyle did not release her until she found her footing. "Marin," he said, "have the healers tend her first." Ilaria looked at the blood still seeping beneath his armor. "No, you first." A flicker crossed his face, almost amusement, almost pain. "You are in my fortress, Lady Vale. Commands are mine to give, and wounds are mine to recognize," she replied, before fear could silence her. Around them, several warriors drew in sharp breaths. No one spoke to Kale Dravener so directly, not unless they had a wish to be buried beneath the north wall. But Kale only studied her, and something like respect moved behind his guarded eyes. "Then recognize this," he said quietly. "If the curse reaches my heart, no healer in this keep can stop it. If you collapse before I know what you did in that forest, neither can you." He turned to Marin. "Both of us." So Ilaria was taken not to a dungeon, but to the king's own healing chamber. A circular room of dark stone, warmed by braziers and lined with shelves of herbs, bone needles, silver bowls, and old wolf charms. The Dravener healers entered cautiously, led by a blind elder named Aura, whose clouded eyes seemed to see far more than sight allowed. She touched Ilaria's wrist and went still. "Moon, take us," Aura whispered. "Where did you find this child?" "In the snow," Kale said, bleeding. Aura's fingers tightened. "No. Where did fate find her?" Ilaria pulled her hand away. "I am no child of fate. I am a rejected Luna with no home." Aura smiled sadly. "Those are often the same thing." The healers removed Kale's armor, revealing the blackened wound near his ribs and the darker veins spreading beneath his skin. Ilaria had seen infection, venom, fever, even silver poisoning, but this was different. The curse moved like a living thing, recoiling when the lamps were raised, advancing when Kale's breath grew shallow. His face remained calm, but his hands clenched against the stone table hard enough to crack one edge. Aura prepared a blade. "We cut out what we can." "No," Ilaria said. stepping closer, though every healer turned. She did not know why she objected. She only knew the curse would not be cut from him. It would follow pain deeper. Kyle watched her through half-lowered eyes. "You know this?" "I feel it." The chamber stilled. Ilaria pressed her hand lightly above the wound, not touching skin yet, and the black veins turned toward her as if recognizing prey. Fear rose in her throat. Then, beneath that fear, something answered. A memory that was not hers, of women in moonlit robes standing in battlefields, singing wolves back from death, their palms glowing blue beneath a silver eclipse. Ilaria staggered. Kael caught her wrist. "Stop if it harms you." The command was harsh, but the concern beneath it was unmistakable. She looked at him then, truly looked, past the warlord's scars and iron control to the loneliness beneath. This was a man surrounded by loyalty, yet prepared to die alone. Slowly, she placed her bleeding palm against his wound. Blue light flooded the chamber. Kael arched from the table, with a growl that shook dust from the ceiling. The curse recoiled, screaming without sound. Every wolf in Spire Keep began to howl. For 3 days after Ilaria drew the poison from Kael's blood, Spire Keep treated her like a miracle it did not trust. She was given a chamber in the East Tower, not locked, but guarded by 2 silent warriors at all hours. Fresh gowns were brought, all dark wool and northern embroidery, along with fur-lined boots, warm broth, and healing salves for her torn feet. No one struck her. No one mocked her openly. Yet when she passed through corridors, conversations died. Mothers pulled children closer. Warriors bowed to Kael and then watched Ilaria from the corners of their eyes, as if expecting horns, fangs, or a crown of witchfire to appear upon her head. She understood. In Blackthornne she had been dismissed, because no one believed she held power. In Spire she was feared, because they had seen proof of it. Both forms of exile felt lonely. Kael came to her on the 3rd night, when the moon was thin and the fortress lay under a silence broken only by wind against stone. He did not enter at first. He stood beyond the threshold as if the room itself belonged to her. "May I?" he asked. The question startled her more than any command could have. Ronan had never asked permission to enter the Luna chamber. Even in tenderness, he had assumed the world would open for him. Ilaria nodded. Kyle stepped inside wearing no armor, only a black tunic fastened at the throat, his dark hair loose around a face made harsher by sleeplessness. Without the iron and fur, he looked younger, though no less dangerous. "Your guards report you have not tried to flee," he said. "Where would I go?" "South, perhaps. Back to the pack that cast you out." Ilaria turned toward the window, where snow moved like ghosts beyond the glass. A woman may mourn a house without wishing to return to the fire that burned her. Kyle was silent for a long moment. "Then you mourn him?" The question was too quiet to be accusation, too controlled to be jealousy, yet it struck her all the same. She thought of Ronan's hand tearing the mark from her throat, his face as he chose Celine's ambition over the woman who had loved him, his silence as guards shoved her into winter. "I mourn who I believed he was," she said. "That man died before I did." Kael's jaw tightened, not with satisfaction, but with restrained anger on her behalf. He crossed the room and placed a folded cloth upon the table. Inside lay the torn strip of her old gown, the part stained with glowing blood from the forest. "Aura found this. She says your blood should not shine after leaving the body unless the old stories are true." Ilaria looked down at it. Even dried, the stain held a faint blue shimmer. "What stories?" Kael's eyes darkened. "Moon healers. Women born under the first Silver Covenant, before the packs became kingdoms. Their blood could draw curses from wolves, seal broken bonds, and heal wounds made by forbidden magic. Kings fought wars to possess them. Councils burned records to hide them. The last known bloodline vanished 200 years ago, after a queen refused to become a weapon." Ilaria laughed once, but it broke before becoming sound. "I grew up in a minor border house. My mother died when I was young. My father was a steward. There is no ancient queen in my blood. Perhaps someone made certain you would believe that. She shook her head, but memories stirred despite her denial. Her mother singing to the moon behind shuttered windows, a silver pendant hidden beneath floorboards, the fever that had nearly killed Ilaria at 13, and the old midwife who fled after seeing her tears turn blue. She had forgotten, because life had demanded forgetting. Kale noticed the change in her face. What do you remember? Fragments. Fragments are how buried kingdoms begin to rise. His voice had softened, and the gentleness of it was more dangerous than his authority. Ilaria stepped away from the table. Do not make me into a prophecy because you need a cure. The words came sharper than she intended. Kale accepted them without flinching. I have buried too many who believed I needed nothing. He looked toward the window, and the firelight carved the scar along his cheek into shadow. The curse in my wolves began after the royal council demanded northern obedience. When I refused, our healers began dying. Our strongest warriors sickened after battle. Children are born now, with black veins beneath their skin. I have conquered enemies because weakness invites slaughter, but I have not conquered this. He turned back to her. If your gift can save them, I will ask for help. I will not take it. Ilaria studied him, searching for the lie, the royal hunger, the same calculation she had seen in Ronan's court. She found only exhaustion and a discipline that seemed built over wounds. And if helping them kills me? She asked. Kael's expression changed. The guarded king vanished for one heartbeat, revealing the man beneath, fierce and shaken by the thought. Then I would forbid it. Her heart answered before her mind could. You cannot forbid me. I know, he said, and something in the way he said it made the room feel smaller, warmer, more dangerous than any battlefield. He stepped closer, slowly enough for her to retreat if she wished. She did not. That is what frightens me. The air between them trembled with all they did not name. His gaze lowered briefly to the scar where Ronan's mark had been torn away. Does it still hurt? Ilaria lifted her hand to her throat. Less. Kale's voice roughened. Good. He reached as if to touch the scar, then stopped himself with visible effort. I have no gentle history with bonds, Lady Vale. My wolf does not trust what the moon gives. It has taken too much. And yet, she whispered. His eyes met hers. And yet when you touched me, every shadow in my blood knew your name before I did. Before she could answer, bells erupted through the fortress. Not alarm bells for attack, temple bells. Aura's voice rang from the corridor, urgent and afraid. My king, the child in the lower ward, the curse has reached her heart. Kale turned at once. Ilaria followed before anyone could ask, and as she ran through Iron Spire's dark halls, the scar at her throat began to glow. The child's name was Mina, and she was 6 years old, though the curse had made her look as pale and ancient as winter itself. Her mother knelt beside the cot in the lower ward, whispering prayers into the girl's hair while healers held back tears they had no time to shed. Black veins spread from Mina's chest to her throat, pulsing in rhythm with a failing heartbeat, and around the cot stood half a dozen warriors who looked more helpless than any defeated army. Kale entered like a storm contained in human shape, but the room did not bow to him. Grief leaves no room for ceremony. The mother looked up, saw Ilaria behind him, and crawled toward her on her knees. Please, she begged. They said you touched the king, and the curse drew back. Please, my lady, please. Ilaria froze. Her own wounds, her fear, her anger at being used by another kingdom, all collapsed beneath the weight of a mother's hands clutching her skirt. I do not know how, she whispered. Aura took her arm gently. Blood remembers what the mind does not. Kale stood beside the cot, his face carved from restraint. You are not commanded, he said, though every soul in the room wanted to command her. You may walk away. Ilaria looked at Mina's tiny hand, curled against the blanket like a bird fallen from its nest. She thought of Blackthornne's children, of the little boy who had once brought her a crooked flower after she sat beside him through fever, of the kitchen boy struck for offering her warmth. No court had made her Luna in the ways that mattered. Service had. Love had. So she sat beside the child and took the small hand in hers. Nothing happened. Panic flickered through the room. Ilaria closed her eyes, searching for the strange inner light that had risen in the forest, but found only exhaustion. Then Kale knelt on the opposite side of the cot. The Warlord King of the North knelt before a dying child without care for who witnessed it. He placed his hand near Ilaria's, not touching, and said quietly, "When you healed me, you were not trying to prove yourself. You were angry that death had been given permission. Be angry now." The words struck something true. Ilaria opened her eyes. She looked at the black veins stealing Mina's breath, at the curse that had no right to take a child who had not yet learned how large the world could be, and fury rose in her with such purity that the lamps exploded blue. She pressed her palm to Mina's chest. The child gasped. Shadows surged up Ilaria's arm like a swarm of black serpents. Pain followed, deep and merciless, but beneath it came song not heard, but remembered, a lullaby in her mother's voice. Moon above and blood below. Take the dark where rivers go. Ilaria sang the words though she did not know them, and the whole ward fell silent as blue light poured from her skin. Mina's back arched. The curse screamed through every wolf in the room. Kale seized Ilaria's shoulders when she swayed, but she did not stop. The black veins withdrew from the child and entered Ilaria's hands, twisting beneath her skin before dissolving into silver. When the light faded, Mina opened her eyes. Her mother sobbed. The warriors sank to their knees one by one, not in fear this time, but reverence. Ilaria tried to stand and collapsed into Kale's arms. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing. "Enough," he said, and though his voice was calm, his eyes burned with terror. "No more." "She is alive," Ilaria whispered. "And you nearly were not." He carried her from the ward before anyone could touch her. Past the kneeling wolves, past Aura's knowing silence, past Marin's troubled stare. By the time they reached the upper corridor, the entire fortress had begun to murmur a word. Ilaria did not understand at first. Veilora, Moonblood, Sacred Healer, Lost Queen. Kale brought her to the temple chamber, where moonlight fell through a circular opening in the ceiling onto a pool of black water. He set her down on a stone bench and knelt before her, examining her hands with a gentleness that made her throat ache. Dark bruises marked her palms where the curse had entered. He looked furious, but not at her. "You will not spend yourself for people who have not earned you." Ilaria gave a tired, bitter smile. People rarely earn mercy before they need it. Mercy can become a chain. So can fear. His gaze lifted to hers. The temple was silent, except for the faint drip of water, and the far sound of wolves howling. Not wild now, but mournful, grateful. Kale brushed his thumb near the bruising, careful not to press. "When I was young," he said, "my father told me, a king must be hard enough that no wound reaches the throne. I believed him until I became king and learned the throne is made of wounds." Ilaria saw then the cost of him, the lives buried beneath his authority, the tenderness locked away, because rulers who revealed softness invited knives. "You saved them by becoming feared," she said, "and you saved Mina by refusing to become what fear made of you." He looked at her for a long time. "No one in my court has spoken to me as if I am still a man. Perhaps they are afraid you will prove them wrong." Something close to a smile touched his mouth, brief and devastating. Then the temple pool rippled, though neither of them had moved. Moonlight gathered in the water, shaping itself into an image. Ilaria, crowned in silver, standing beside a black wolf beneath a blood-red moon, while a golden-haired alpha knelt at her feet with ash on his hands. Ilaria went cold. Kale saw it too. Before either could speak, the water darkened, and Celine's face appeared in the reflection, smiling from far away as if she were looking directly into the chamber. "Found you," the image whispered. Then the pool shattered upward into steam. By morning, A raven arrived from Blackthornne carrying a message sealed in crimson wax and written in Ronan's own hand. Though Ilaria knew before Kyle broke the seal that the words had been chosen by the council. The message accused Spire of kidnapping the lawful widow of Blackthornne Honor, claimed Ilaria had fled in madness after the release ceremony, and demanded her return for healing and judgment. The hypocrisy of it struck so sharply that she laughed. A soft, broken sound that silenced the war council gathered around Kyle's table. Merrin stood near the map wall with her arms crossed, distrust still visible in the set of her mouth. Aura sat beside the fire, prayer beads moving through her fingers. Iron generals, border captains, and pack elders watched Ilaria as if she were the spark that might set the mountain ablaze. KL laid the message upon the table. They cast her out. Now they call her lawful. They know, Aura said, or they suspect. One of the older captains, Lord Varric Soren, leaned forward. He was a narrow-faced man with a polished beard and eyes too calm for a soldier. If Blackthornne believes she carries Moonhealer blood, they will not stop with petitions. Neither will the Royal Council. With respect, my king, one woman cannot be allowed to endanger the North. Kyle's stare cut to him. Choose your next words with care. Varric bowed his head slightly. I speak only of strategy. Return her under guard. Demand treaty concessions. And let Blackthornne's court choke on the problem they created. A murmur of unease moved through the room. Ilaria stood very still. She had known fear of being claimed, but hearing herself weighed as a bargaining piece scraped old wounds raw. Kale's hand closed around the edge of the table. She is not a border fortress to be traded. No, Varric said softly. She may be a weapon powerful enough to bring every kingdom to our gates. Then let them come. The words were quiet. No one mistook them for bravado. Ilaria should have felt protected, and part of her did, but another part trembled at the speed with which Kale's defense of her could become war. She had been made responsible for Blackthornne's disappointment. Now she might be made responsible for the North's bloodshed. After the council dismissed, she went to the battlements to breathe, only to find Merrin waiting among the snow-dusted stones. The silver-haired commander did not bow. You should know what people say. Ilaria looked across the valley. People always say what fear teaches them. They say you bewitched him. Did I? Merrin's expression did not change. I do not know. I saw my king nearly die in the forest and rise because of your hands. I saw a cursed child breathe because of your blood. I also saw him look at you as if every oath he made before you entered this fortress is now ash. Ilaria turned. Do you hate me for that? I hate anything that could unmake him. The honesty of it was cleaner than courtly kindness. Ilaria wrapped Kale's cloak tighter around herself. Then we have something in common. I know what it is to watch a ruler become unmade by whispers. Merrin studied her for a long moment, and some of the hardness left her face. There is another thing you should know. Varric has sent riders east twice since your arrival. He claims they carry supply orders. My scouts found no such orders at the outposts. Before Ilaria could answer, the fortress bells rang again, but this time they were not temple bells. They were alarm. Smoke rose from the lower gate. Blackthornne riders had not come as petitioners. They had come with Royal Council soldiers, Celene's white banner, and cages of silver iron meant for cursed wolves and witches. Kale met them in the outer courtyard beneath a sky heavy with snow. Ilaria stood behind him despite every attempt to keep her inside, because hiding had never saved her. Ronan rode at the head of the Blackthornne force, crowned in alpha steel, with Selene beside him in the Luna cloak that had once belonged to Ilaria. Seeing him should have broken something open. Instead, Ilaria felt a strange stillness. He looked thinner, haunted, his golden confidence tarnished by sleeplessness. When his eyes found her, relief flashed across his face before Selene's hand tightened on his reins. Ilaria, he called, voice rough. Come home. The courtyard stirred. Kyle's wolf growled beneath his skin. Ilaria felt it like thunder. Home? She said, stepping forward. Ronan flinched at the sound of her voice. You were confused. The ceremony was mishandled. I can protect you from what they will say if you return now. You threw me into a blizzard without shoes. A few northern wolves snarled. Ronan's face tightened with shame, but Celine answered first. You were released lawfully. What followed was unfortunate, but your current situation is far more dangerous. This king is using you. Kael's smile was cold enough to freeze blood. Careful, false Luna. I have killed for less honest insults. Celine ignored him and lifted a scroll sealed with the royal moon. By decree of the High Council, Ilaria Vale is accused of forbidden bloodcraft, unlawful influence over a sovereign alpha, and concealment of extinct magic. She is to be surrendered for examination. Examination. Ilaria knew what that meant. Chains, knives, bowls of blood, priests demanding miracles until nothing remained. Ronan looked away. That small cowardice hurt more than accusation. Then Varric moved. In one swift motion, he seized Ilaria from behind and pressed a silver blade to her throat. Chaos erupted. Kael turned, eyes black with his wolf, but Varric dragged her backward toward the gate winch. Stand down, my king, Varric shouted. The council promised the curse would end if she is delivered. Merrin raised her sword, fury transforming her face. Traitor, Varric's grip tightened. The silver burned Ilaria's skin. I am saving the north from a king bewitched by a southern witch. Kael took one step forward. Varric cut Ilaria shallowly across the throat. Blood spilled over the old torn mark. It hit the snow at her feet. The entire courtyard went silent as the blood began to glow blue. The first drop of Ilaria's blood sank into the snow and did not freeze. It spread in a shining line, thin as thread, circling her feet, then widening across the courtyard, in a luminous ring that passed beneath warriors, horses, wolves, and stone, as if the earth itself had been waiting for permission to remember. Varric cursed and tried to pull her back, but the silver blade in his hand melted, not with heat, but with moonlight. He screamed as it ran like water through his fingers. Ilaria staggered free. Kael moved toward her, but Aura's voice cut through the courtyard like a temple bell. Do not touch her. The blood is speaking. The sky darkened, though it was midday. Clouds drew apart in a perfect circle above Iron Spire, revealing the moon pale and enormous against daylight. Every wolf present, northern and Blackthornne alike, dropped to one knee or fell to all fours under a pressure older than command. Celine's horse reared. Ronan dismounted with his face drained of color. Ilaria stood at the center of the glowing ring, one hand pressed to her bleeding throat, while memories that had been sealed inside her broke open like floodgates. She saw her mother not as a steward's widow, but as Lysandra of the Moonveil line, last daughter of a hunted healer queen. She saw a cradle, hidden beneath monastery stones, silver-robed women dying to protect a newborn child, a council elder branding false records with lies, a prophecy carved into moonstone. When the cast-out Luna bleeds upon winter's crown, the healer queen shall rise, and the cursed wolf shall know his mate. Ilaria cried out as the memories burned through her, not because they were false, but because they made sense of every silence in her life. Her mother's fear, her father's evasions, the midwife who fled. The way sick wolves calmed when Ilaria sang. The way Ronan's mark had never fully claimed her, because another bond, older and stronger, had been sleeping beneath it. Celine understood at the same time. Her beautiful face twisted, and for the first time her mask shattered before witnesses. No, she hissed. She was supposed to be barren. The seal was supposed to hold. Ronan turned to her slowly. What seal? Celine realized too late what she had revealed. Ilaria looked at her. You knew. Celine backed away. I knew you were dangerous. You knew what I was. The glowing snow pulsed. The court soldiers shifted uneasily. Celine lifted her chin, pride returning like armor. Your bloodline destroyed kingdoms. Men died fighting over women like you. The council did what it had to do. The council? Cale's voice was deadly. Aura pointed toward the Blackthornne elder who had come with Ronan's force, the same man who had urged the rejection ceremony. Ask him how many moon healer infants were smothered in their cradles to keep kings from losing control. The elder tried to retreat, but the luminous ring flared, trapping him where he stood. Under the moon's merciless light, his glamour broke. He was older than he had appeared, with black veins beneath his eyes and a council brand burned into his palm. "She would have ruled you all," he spat, fear sharpening into hatred. Moon healers do not serve as obedient wives. They bind wolves by loyalty instead of fear. They ruin thrones built properly on dominance. Ilaria felt the words strike the courtyard. Not only her truth, but the truth of every pack that had taught women to call obedience peace. Ronan looked sick. "You told me she was cursed. You told me she would weaken the pack." The elder sneered. "And you believed it because it suited you." A sound escaped Ronan, half growl, half grief. Celine reached for him. "Ronan." He stepped away from her. Too late. The reversal came not with satisfaction, but with terrible clarity. Ilaria saw him then as he was. Not the villain who had invented her pain, but the weak man who had chosen not to question it. That was enough to condemn him. The glowing ring rose in threads around her body, weaving through her hair, across her torn throat, down her arms. Her gown transformed, not into jewels or silk, but into something older. A mantle of moonlit white over dark blue, embroidered with silver branches and ancient wolf runes. On her brow appeared no heavy crown, but a slender circlet of living light. The wolves howled, not in fear, but recognition. Kyle stood just beyond the ring, his black wolf visible in the shadow behind him, massive and trembling with the force of the bond awakening. Ilaria turned to him. The world narrowed. The torn place where Ronan's mark had been filled with warmth, then fire, then a pull so deep she understood why the old stories feared true mates. Kale did not move. He waited, giving her the choice even now, even before armies, traitors, enemies, and gods. "Ilaria," he said, and her name in his mouth felt like a vow. The ring opened between them. She stepped forward. Kale sank to one knee. Gasps rippled through both armies. The Warlord King, who knelt to no crown, bowed his head before the rejected Luna in the snow. "Not as weapon," he said, voice carrying to every wall. "Not as prisoner, not as cure. As my equal, if you will have me. As the queen my wolf knew before my pride did." Ilaria's heart broke and remade itself in the same breath. Behind her, Ronan whispered her name like a man watching a door close forever. Celine screamed for the archers to fire, and the first arrow flew toward Kale's heart. Ilaria saw the arrow before anyone else moved. It came from the royal soldiers behind Celine, silver-tipped and black-fletched, aimed not at the healer they wanted to possess, but at the king who had just made possession impossible. Kale rose, too late to draw steel. Ilaria lifted her hand. The arrow stopped inches from his chest, suspended in blue light, trembling like a trapped wasp. Then every arrow in every quiver across the courtyard wrenched free and hovered above the armies, their points turning toward the sky. The moon darkened at its edges, and daylight bled into crimson. The prophecy had not ended with the reveal. It had begun. The elder laughed then, wild and bitter. "You see? This is what she is. This is why her bloodline was buried." But Kale did not look afraid. He looked at Ilaria with a fierce, impossible pride that steadied her more than any spell. Celine drew a hidden dagger and lunged at Ronan, perhaps to punish him for hesitation, perhaps to spill alpha blood, and trigger whatever dark bargain she had made with the council. Ronan caught her wrist, but she was faster than he remembered. The blade cut his side, and black veins burst instantly from the wound. Poison. Not ordinary poison, but the same curse that had nearly killed Kyle. The Blackthornne wolves recoiled in horror as their alpha fell to one knee. Celine stepped back, breathing hard. "He would have crawled back to her," she said, voice shaking with hatred. "All of you would. The moment she glowed, the moment she wept, the moment men realized weakness could be worshipped, if wrapped in moonlight. Ilaria stared at the woman who had taken her crown and found no triumph in her ruin, only exhaustion. You could have been more than their instrument. Celine's eyes shone with fury. And live in your shadow? The elder raised his branded hand, chanting in an ancient council tongue. The cages of silver iron burst open, releasing not prisoners but cursed wolves, dozens of them, starved, maddened, their eyes black, their bodies twisted by the same living darkness. They had been brought as proof, as threat, as sacrifice. Now they surged into the courtyard, attacking anything near them. Panic broke the armies. Northern warriors formed ranks around civilians. Blackthornne soldiers scattered. Kyle shifted mid-stride, his body tearing into the enormous black wolf of Dravener legend, and the sight of him stole even Ilaria's breath. He was terrifying, beautiful, all midnight fur and silver eyes, a creature built from war and winter. He charged the cursed wolves, not to slaughter them but to drive them away from the helpless, taking wounds meant for others. Ilaria understood then the true cruelty of the curse. It turned protectors into monsters and forced kings to kill those they had failed to save. Not this time. She moved into the center of the courtyard. Aura shouted for her to stop. Marin fought toward her. Kael's wolf turned, blood on his jaws, fear blazing through the bond. But Ilaria had spent her life being told she was not enough, too soft, too silent, too barren, too weak, too late. She would not be too late now. She pressed both bleeding palms to the snow and called not with words, but with everything she had ever loved and lost. Blue light erupted from her in a wave. It struck the cursed wolves first. They froze, snarling, then collapsed, as the black veins lifted from their bodies in smoky ribbons. The curse fought back. It surged toward Ilaria, drawn to her healer blood like wolves to a wounded deer. Pain tore through her arms, her chest, her throat. She screamed, but she did not release it. One by one, the cursed wolves shifted back into human forms. Men, women, children, soldiers missing for months. Northern scouts believed dead. Blackthornne prisoners, even a young royal guard who began sobbing when he saw his own hands clean again. The courtyard fell to its knees around her, but the elder was still chanting, and the curse gathering above Ilaria grew larger. A black mass threaded with silver, too much for one body to hold. Kael shifted back into human form and ran to her despite the danger. "Ilaria, let it go," he shouted. "It will kill you." She looked at him through the light, tears streaking her face. "Then help me carry it." The words were not command. They were trust. Kyle reached her and took her hands. The curse slammed into both of them. He roared as it entered his blood, but he did not let go. The bond between them flared open, not soft, not gentle, but vast enough to hold darkness without breaking. Ilaria felt his wounds, his loneliness, his fear of becoming a tyrant like the men he hated. Kael felt her humiliation, her years of quiet endurance, the snow beneath her bare feet, the moment Ronan turned away. Neither looked away from the other. Together they drew the curse into the bond and forced it downward, into the glowing ring of moon blood beneath the snow. The earth cracked. Blue fire burst upward. The elder's chant became a scream as the curse recognized its maker. It turned on him, wrapping his branded arm, devouring the spells layered through his bones. "No," he cried. "I preserved order." Aura's voice answered, cold and clear. "You preserved fear." The curse consumed the brand, then vanished in a pillar of blue flame that shot into the crimson moon. Silence followed, vast and ringing. Ilaria swayed. Kael caught her before she fell, lowering her gently to the snow. Ronan crawled toward them, black veins spreading from Celine's poison wound. His face was gray, eyes fixed on Ilaria with terrible pleading. "I do not deserve it," he whispered. She looked at him for a long time. Around them, Blackthornne wolves watched, seeing not the weak Luna they had discarded. but the woman who now held their alpha's life in her hands. Revenge would have been easy. It would have been understood, perhaps even celebrated. But Ilaria had not become powerful to imitate those who hurt her. She reached out and touched Ronan's wound. Blue light flickered weakly. She had so little strength left. Kael's arm tightened around her, but he did not stop her. The poison withdrew enough for Ronan to breathe, not enough to restore what he had lost. "Live," she said softly, "and remember this mercy. Every time you sit on a throne you did not earn with courage." Ronan bowed his head into the snow and wept. Celine tried to flee in the confusion, but Merrin caught her at the gate and tore the stolen Luna cloak from her shoulders. No one cheered. Some endings are too heavy for cheers. The blood moon faded to silver. Dawn touched the mountains. And Kael, still holding Ilaria before two kingdoms, lifted his gaze to the gathered wolves and spoke the words that would change the north forever. Blackthornne cast her out. The council hunted her. The moon revealed her. "I claim no ownership over Ilaria Moonveil Vale." He looked down at her, and his voice softened, so that only those closest heard the tremor beneath it. "But if she chooses Iron Spire, then I will build a throne beside mine, and call any wolf who kneels to fear my enemy." Ilaria, half conscious in his arms, opened her eyes. "A throne beside yours? Above mine if you demand it." Despite the pain, she smiled faintly. "Beside is enough." Then the warriors of Iron Spire knelt. After a long, broken silence, the wolves of Blackthornne knelt too. The days after the courtyard became the kind of days bards later ruined by making them sound simple. They would sing that the rejected Luna revealed her moonblood, broke the curse, humbled the false court, and was claimed by the Warlord King beneath a silver dawn, as if healing a kingdom were as clean as drawing a blade from its sheath. The truth was slower, harder, and more human. Ilaria slept for 2 days, and woke to pain in every bone. Kael asleep in a chair beside her bed, with one hand wrapped around hers, as if his body had refused the command to leave. Aura said the curse had not vanished entirely, but its root had been burned from the council brand, and the remaining sickness could now be healed with time, herbs, and Ilaria's guidance, rather than her blood alone. Merrin came to apologize, though she did it standing stiffly near the door as if marching into battle would have been easier. Ilaria accepted before pride could make the commander suffer longer than necessary, and in the weeks that followed, Merrin became less guard than shield, less skeptic than friend. Varric was judged by northern law and stripped of rank, though Ilaria asked that he not be executed. "Betrayal born of fear," she said, "should be answered with justice, not hunger." Celine's fate was returned to Blackthornne, where the women whose sons and daughters she had endangered demanded a trial before the lower dens instead of the noble council. Ronan survived, though the poison left a permanent dark scar along his side, a visible reminder of the corruption he had mistaken for wisdom. He sent no demand for Ilaria's return. He sent one letter, written in his own hand, containing apology without excuse. Ilaria read it by the eastern window, while snow fell softly beyond the glass. Then she placed it in the fire. Kael watched from across the room but said nothing. That was one of the ways she came to trust him. He did not demand the story of every wound before allowing her to heal. As winter deepened, wolves from distant packs came to Ironspire carrying sick children, cursed warriors, old records, hidden pendants, and rumors of other girls whose blood glimmered faintly beneath the moon. Ilaria built not a court of obedient nobles, but a healing circle in the abandoned West Hall, where rank mattered less than need, and every child was taught the old songs without fear. The first time she stood before the Northern Council wearing the circlet of Moonveil light, some elders could not meet her eyes. By the end of that council, after she named the grain debt, the border widows, the orphaned cubs, and the lies hidden in royal tax ledgers, they understood that healing was not softness. Healing was the discipline of refusing to let rot remain, simply because powerful men had grown comfortable with its smell. Kael watched her rule with the same intensity with which he fought, but differently now. Less like a man guarding a miracle, and more like a wolf learning the shape of home. Their bond did not settle quickly into sweetness. It burned, argued, pulled, challenged. He was still a king carved by war. She was still a woman learning that her gentleness had never been weakness. There were nights when he withdrew into silence rather than speak of fear, and nights when she pushed too far because she feared being powerless again. Yet each time, they returned. He learned to ask before protecting. She learned that accepting shelter was not surrender. And slowly, the fortress of iron and frost changed around them. The lower wards filled with laughter. The temple pool cleared. Blue moonflowers bloomed along the battlements where no flower had survived in 100 years. On the first full moon after the curse broke, Kale brought Ilaria to the high terrace above Iron Spire, where the entire north stretched beneath them in silver and shadow. He wore no crown, as always, but he carried something wrapped in black velvet. "I had the smiths make this from no conquered gold," he said, unfolding the cloth. Inside lay a crown unlike the one she had dropped on Blackthornne's floor. This one was slender silver, shaped like winter branches around a crescent moon, set not with jewels but with a single blue stone that seemed lit from within. Ilaria touched it, then looked at him. "And if I do not want a crown?" Kale's mouth curved. "Then I will throw it off the mountain and pretend the smiths never troubled themselves." She laughed then, truly laughed, and the sound startled both of them with its brightness. He stepped closer. "I am not Ronan," he said quietly. "I know I will still fail you in ways I do not yet understand." "I know that too." His eyes searched hers, gray and guarded and vulnerable in a way the world would never be allowed to see. "Then why do you look at me as if you are not afraid?" Ilaria lifted her hand to his face, tracing the scar along his cheek. "Because I'm afraid, but not of being unseen." The words moved through him like a blade pulled carefully from an old wound. He closed his eyes briefly, leaning into her touch. And when he opened them again, the bond between them warmed with a devotion so fierce it nearly hurt. "Ilaria Moonveil Vale," he said, voice roughening. "Rejected Luna of Blackthornne, healer of the cursed, breaker of council chains. Will you stand beside me, not behind me, not beneath me, but beside me as queen of the Iron Crescent?" The wind lifted her hair. Far below, wolves gathered in the courtyard, Northern and Blackthornne together, waiting without command. Ilaria thought of the night she had been dragged barefoot through snow, of the gate closing behind her, of the child she had saved, of the man before her kneeling in a blood-soaked courtyard and refusing to claim ownership over what he loved. She took the crown from the velvet and placed it not on her own head, but in his hands. Then she knelt not to him, but with him, lowering them both to the terrace stones beneath the moon. "Only if you understand one thing," she said. Kale's brows drew together. "Name it." "I was not made queen because you chose me." She guided his hands and set the crown upon her brow. Blue light flared softly, reflecting in his eyes. "I was already queen when I survived what was meant to destroy me." Kale bowed his head, not in defeat, but in reverence. "Then let the North learn what I have learned." He rose and brought her with him. Together, they stepped to the edge of the terrace. The wolves below saw the crown ignite with moonlight and erupted into howls that rolled across the mountains like a living vow. Ilaria felt Kale's hand find hers, not gripping, not claiming, simply there. In the distance, far beyond the valleys, Blackthornne Keep stood beneath the same moon. Its halls no doubt colder now without the woman they had mistaken for weak. But Ilaria did not look south for long. Her story no longer belonged to the place that cast her out. It belonged to the snow that failed to kill her, the blood that revealed her, the wounded king who saw her not as ruin but as rising, and the kingdom that would learn beneath her reign that mercy could be more terrifying than war. And when Kale bent close, his voice low enough for only her to hear, he said, "My queen." Ilaria turned to him, moonlight shining over the scar at her throat, where rejection had once marked her ending. "My wolf," she answered. Then the Warlord King kissed the rejected Luna beneath the full moon, and every curse left in the north trembled, because the woman thrown barefoot into winter had become the one thing fear could not survive. A queen who had learned her own worth before anyone else dared name it.